Good afternoon. Thanks so much for joining CMB today for our August webinar. My name is John Wood. If we haven't had a chance to meet, I'm the Communications and Member Services Manager for CMB. And today we're going to dive into a topic that I can remember from my radio days of what if we could actually know who's listening in the car in real time so we can make really impactful decisions. And what's amazing is technology has changed so much that that question has really shifted from what if we had that to what do we do with it now because it exists. We're excited to dive into this. I can't think of anyone better than Mike Couchman to explore this with us. Mike's the operations manager for Gateway Christian Broadcasting. I'm sorry, Gateway Creative Broadcasting with the Joy FM, Boost Radio, and Worship One in St. Louis. And he's going to join us in just a second to take the deep dive. But before we do that, it's important that you don't experience FOMO and that you know what's going on in our industry. And we're super excited about a couple of things happening right now, including our gold member gathering. So if you're a gold member, this is already included in your membership. You can register complimentary. But here's the thing, registration closes today. Now, what are we going to be doing? We're going to be in Washington, D.C. in 2 weeks, August 25th through the 27th, as we're going to be experiencing something truly incredible. I'm super excited because we're going to have best-selling author and pastor Mark Batterson leading our time together as he's going to be walking us through some practical insights of, as we're helping to shape our culture as Christian media leaders, how can we make sure that we're staying on course, but we're also setting the right course for our teams, for our ministries? Plus, maybe even more importantly, you're going to have an opportunity to connect with other Christian media leaders who understand what you're going through, who are trying to maximize not only the resources at hand, but plan for what's ahead. And plus, we're in DC. It's our nation's capital. There's so much to do, so much to experience. We might take in America's favorite pastime, Nationals game. I'm a big Washington Nationals fan, super excited about that. But we're also going to be doing some exploration of the city on a sunset trolley. And how about this? We're going to be at National Community Church. This is Mark's church in the DC area, and we're going to be at their Dream Factory. But we're also going to be at the Museum of the Bible. And here's the thing, word on the street is they have the actual Dead Sea Scrolls on display right now. So talk about a once in a lifetime experience. So again, if you're a gold member, it's not too late to register, but it does close at midnight tonight. So if you'd like to do that, you can do it at cmbonline.org. And hey, listen, if you're a silver member or you'd like to still become a gold member and you want to upgrade if you're a silver, it's not too late. Just reach out to me, John, Jon, at cmbonline.org. The other thing that I'm really excited about right now is we just opened up the 2026 CMB Tech Survey. This is an annual research project. We've been working together with Jacobs Media just for years, and it has always been so insightful because just like we're talking about today, better understanding where our audience is, how our listeners are engaging with us. It's also understanding how they're engaging just with the technology landscape in general. There's so much change. There's so many things swirling around. This is an opportunity to take a deep dive with your listeners specifically to gain the most insights you can that can help you as you're making strategic decisions. Plus, if you participate, you'll also be able to take a glimpse at the nationwide picture. What are we seeing across the board? And then compare that. If you're a CMB member, you get a $250 discount. But even if you're not a CMB member, this is something that's worth the investment. So I tell you what, I'll send you all the information so you don't have to go dig for it. If you'll text the keyword tech, just that one word, tech, to our number 72747, I'll send you the link back about getting more information and how you can go ahead and get registered today. So thankful you're joining us today. If you haven't checked in the chat yet, just to say hello, go ahead and get those fingers warmed up. I'm sure we're going to have plenty of questions that are going to pop up during today's conversation, and we want to get to as many as we can at the end. So if you haven't said hello yet, go ahead, drop your name in, where you're checking in from, and we'll keep track of those questions as our time together moves forward. So with that being said, I'm excited to welcome Mike Couchman onto the screen with me because Mike's going to be our tour guide today through this incredible tool. Mike, thank you so much for being here today and showing us the ropes.
Hey, thanks a lot for taking time to get a bit nerdy about numbers and technology. I've been poking around DTS AutoStage, the premium version, for the past few months, and I have become a bit of a fan, but I'm not trying to sell you on it. For all of Nielsen's well-known flaws, it does really give us some valuable information that DTS cannot, at least not yet. So, hold on a second here. Let's have a quick refresher on how Nielsen measures our audiences. Depending on your market size, they're either paying random people a little bit of money to carry around meters or try and remember what they listen to and write that down in a paper or electronic diary. Right out of the gate, we all know the holes that you can poke into either approach. It's really outdated. Even PPM technology is like 2000s, and we're closer to 2030 now than we are to the year 2000, and that's a bit terrifying and sad on a personal level. Um, so, Nielsen, either way, PPM or diary, is at the mercy of our listeners' busy lives, remembering to carry the meter around or really recalling what they listened to when they filled the diary out. Plus, the biggest sticking point of all, radio has long complained about Nielsen's sample sizes. DTS AutoStage runs circles around Nielsen on that front, and we'll get into specifics soon before the top of the hour. A little appointment listening tease for you. Other knocks against Nielsen on the PPM side fall on how your signal is encoded. Certain formats and genres that used to have really good ratings pre-PPM days, they were completely killed off by PPM measurement. Rest in peace, smooth jazz. Others that are still with us are suffering in the PPM era because Nielsen can't recruit enough panelists in their target demographic. Let's stations with younger audiences or non-white listeners. They're on the Nielsen struggle bus these days. DTS might not be their savior either, though. More on that is also on the way. That's another tease. I'm just going to pack them in here. Despite all of our complaints about Nielsen, Christian music radio generally pretty thriving in these Nielsen days. For many of us, our biggest pain point comes to ROI. Even if you get that RRC non-com discount, is it really worth what you pay to have Nielsen? We have it good as a format, more or less, but Nielsen's methods are not likely to catch up to the 2020s anytime soon. DTS AutoStage, much more immediate. While you're watching this webinar, they're measuring thousands, tens of thousands of listeners in your market, maybe. By this time tomorrow, you could have insights into what your listeners are doing at this very moment. DTS is monitoring vehicle radios and instantly capturing that data. Every preset, push, or scan up and down the dial to and away from your brand, they're getting all that. And you don't have to wait for a ratings period to wrap up to get access to that listening information. But DTS doesn't know who is listening. They can't tell you your female to male split, your gender ratio, the age ranges of your listeners, the ethnicity.
Hey,
and
Mike,
it's only kept. Yes, sir.
before we go any further, technology is always so fun. I think we've lost your share screen. Do you mind resharing with us again, please?
Yes, sure. Where were we? You see that?
Not yet.
Hold on one second. Why did it go away?
There we go. We
All
got you.
right.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike.
You mean eyeballs around me the whole time and not the slides?
Well, everyone enjoys looking at you, so don't worry.
Oh, no. Okay, so we talked about, I don't know where we left off in the slides. We'll just pick up here. We talked about DTS doesn't know who's listening because it's capturing vehicle tune-ins only, and it doesn't know who's in your driver's seat or your passenger seat or in the back seat. It's also not capturing your at-work listening, your streaming listening, your at-home listening. DTS also runs into trouble where internet connectivity is an issue. That would include rural areas or markets that have a variety of terrains. And lastly, while DTS will show you similar metrics to Nielsen, it doesn't show you the hard number you might most want to know, your actual audience size, your CUM. I have a workaround for that, though. That's on the way. Another obligatory radio tease. Sorry, we'll pay off on them. Sorry, I haven't delivered on the first two teases yet either. We got all discombobulated with the slides disappearing. Speaking of radios, those annoying touchscreen displays, I think a lot of us would rather just have the knobs back. Those are the ones that are most likely to have DTS auto stage tech spying on you and your audience. As far as I know, you can't really opt out of it. You get one of these cars, and there goes the data. But it's getting all of your signals: analog, HD, HD2, HD whatever. These are the brands that DTS is currently in. Not every model of every one of these brands, but for some, it's a pretty significant portion of their fleets. And for most of them going back to the early 2020s. So we're about, what, 6 or so years in on this. But what about all of your listeners that have pre-COVID, pre-2020 cars? This is a really decent cross section of models and manufacturers. You've got mass footprint brands like Kia and Nissan, but you see on that slide, you've got a lot of high end brands too. And that all adds up, at least temporarily, to a bit of a skew in the types of formats that are in a better position to look good in DTS auto stage measurement. Things are going to even out though in the next few years as the newer models become used cars, as the technology filters into the fleet at large, and as DTS adds more brands to their monitoring. Take a look at this iceberg. So today, the formats at the top of your screen are the ones that are going to benefit the most from listeners that drive cars with DTS tech. They might overperform in DTS ratings versus Nielsen. Then in the middle of your screen, these are formats who they're at the waterline. Like the way things are with cars and demographics, what you see in DTS is probably close-ish to reality. And then under the waterline, these are formats that probably have a better chance of being undercounted by DTS. The cars that haven't filtered into the people most likely to consume these genres. But as the world turns and the days of our lives progress, that waterline is going to come down. Those formats should be on a more level playing field as their heads, I guess, come above the waterline. Their audiences will be more bold and beautiful looking, even if their listeners are young and restless. It's the middle of the day. Anyone else watch soap operas this time of day? Promise I don't. If car buying and selling trends hold, we could be there in the next 5 years. Could. Don't quote me on that. Don't want to be like, that person who predicted all those cars would be self-driving by 2015. So I have two different screens here. All right. I'm going to give you a chance to look at that. That's just kind of the prediction of how things are going to progress with where cars are now to where they could be in a few years. Let's start paying off on some of those appointment listening teases from earlier. We're going to tackle sample size first. Here's a look at the markets that our group has signals in, sorted by largest first. We have a boost radio signal in the Chicago area, and you'll see that Chicago DTS monitored more than 130,000 vehicles when I took this screenshot. Compare that to Nielsen. Nielsen had about 3,000 meters during this same time frame. So think of it this way. For every PPM device in Chicago, there are 43 connected DTS vehicles in the Windy City. DTS was collecting 43 times more listening data than Nielsen. At the bottom of your screen, Columbus, Ohio. Vehicle count, going to be much smaller, obviously, but Nielsen's PPM sample is too. Columbus PPM is probably about 800 active in a typical week compared to 35,000 cars. So that's still a massively large pool of radio listeners compared to meters. But maybe if we go to a smaller diary market, things would even out. I'm going to zoom you in on a city that raised me, Lansing, Michigan. Just under 500,000 residents in that metro, 4,600 cars. And Nielsen this week will get roughly 50 usable diaries back for the week. That's 7 to 8 a day for a market of nearly 500,000 people where you can receive more than 100 radio stations. Another nice perk of DTS is that to give you a glimpse into any market your signal penetrates, even if it's just a little bit. So we don't have multiple Joy FM signals. We have one in St. Louis, but near to us, Jefferson City, Missouri, Jefferson City, Columbia, to our west, and Springfield, Illinois, to our north. And we have enough listeners there that we get just, a little bit of ping from those markets consistently. Let's get to the really juicy stuff. This would be actual audience measurement. They show you a snapshot of St. Louis, Missouri. This is from April. We're looking at some of the same metrics that you're probably used to seeing in Nielsen, except that ages 6+, it's ages 0 to whoever the oldest driver in St. Louis is. I think I was behind them coming in this morning. You're seeing market share, Cume share, day parts, weekly time spent listening, and something that I don't think Nielsen gives, unless I've missed it, total time listened for the week over there in your far right. I added the Nielsen ranks to the slide. DTS wouldn't show you these, but I thought we might find the comparisons interesting. The market's number one station was ranked fourth in Nielsen during the same time frame. And besides that, the market's top five in DTS don't even come close to matching Nielsen's top five. And that inconsistency actually continues as you move across the dial. The station you see in 10th place in Nielsen, they are almost never outside the top three. They're a classic rock station. In fact, yesterday when July numbers came out for St. Louis, that station you see in 10th place was number one in town. Heading up I-55 to Chicago, and the surprises continue. We won't talk about all of them, but let's look a little bit at the station in third place. This is going to pay off the second tease that you heard in the webinar. Not that you're keeping track. If you are, that's really thank you, I guess. So station in number three, that's B96. Their Nielsen numbers and really the format that B96 is part of, CHR, have been taking a beating for the past 6 or so years. So much of a beating that B96 actually made a splash a few years ago. They regressed to a wildly gold-based approach, and a lot of CHR stations around the country have been following suit. In Nielsen, that barely helped them. This the 10th place showing they had in Nielsen during the same time frame was actually one of their better months. But here in DTS, they're still the same market leader that they were when I was growing up. Maybe they were a market leader before they regressed and they never even had to. This goes to the thing I mentioned earlier about how Nielsen methodology has done some pretty big damage to successful brands and formats. Let's look at one more market. Heading back to Michigan's capital city. I didn't put Nielsen comparisons on this one because these numbers are fairly fresh for a rating survey that's still in progress. The summer book. The diaries are still out in the wild. Whopping 50 of them for this week. But check out all the stations that are circled. Even if we wanted to compare their numbers with Nielsen, we couldn't. The stations that you see circled either don't subscribe to Nielsen or they're bleeding in from other markets. If you're not familiar with Michigan, Lansing, we do this where I grew up. As a camera, I don't know which way the camera. Anyways, Lansing's in the middle of 7 other Nielsen metros, and many of those signals come in on the Lansing dial just as clear as the city's hometown stations. For example, you'll see in second place, country station B93. That's a 320,000 watt signal from Grand Rapids, about an hour away. One of the things this illustrates is that DTS is measuring every signal in our market, AM, FM, whether you choose to encode or not. Orlando's a great example. Like Z88 was a huge player in Orlando ratings before they chose to stop encoding with Nielsen. And so every time you see Orlando numbers, you're not really seeing the real picture because Z88 is omitted from that market. If I was an ad seller in this market in Lansing, I probably wouldn't want this list of all these non-local stations out there. A few minutes ago, I breezed over DTS AutoStage's challenges with detecting listeners in rural areas and places that have a variety of terrains. That missing graphic, that was funny in my head when I was putting this together. Like, it's a bad connection. Picture won't load, but now that I'm sharing this with you, it just looks like I goofed up. If you have to explain the joke. Anyhow, catch me at the Dry Bar Haha Lounge in Pittsburgh this Friday. In Pittsburgh, we have a Boost translator. And if you've never been to Pittsburgh, it's exceptionally hilly and close to the Appalachian Mountains. And you see that for us, that's a pretty painful place to be compared to other signals we have. How do we know that the signal, well, we don't know for sure it's underperforming, but my hunch is, and I'll admit to you, it's a bit gut and a bit other tools and our knowledge of how we do in other markets with a similar signal, we'd be in the top 20. But aside from that, our donations from Pittsburgh tell us a more positive and encouraging story than that graphic. Let's get into the immediacy of DTS data. This is what John was mentioning at the top about being able to see listening almost as it's happening. Our contemporary Christian station, Joy FM, recently did daily appointment listening for Forrest Frank tickets. If you wanted to know whether that moved the needle with Nielsen or not, you'd be waiting a long time for those numbers to drop. And even then, if you're going to go as granular as a single day part and definitely a quarter hour with Nielsen, your sample size is going to be way too tiny. Put any stock in that. If the numbers didn't deviate or they went down, who knows why? Could be just because there weren't enough meters or diary keepers. But if you had a giant uptick, it might have just been a prize pig driving that uptick in Nielsen, like me when I was 13. This kid won tickets to see Whitney Houston, by the way. He was really happy about that. Gave his mom the tickets because he wasn't old enough to drive himself there. Um, so here's Thursday, July 16th. We had access to Thursday's ratings or listening on Friday morning. So Kim Underwood had her Forrest Frank contest around 5:15 p.m. It was promoted in advance. Now in the background in gray, you're seeing the 4-week average for that time frame. In green, that's just July 16th. And you might notice the little boost just after 5 p.m. You see how it hangs through the 5:15 contest and for the rest of the hour. You notice how this day's listening is significantly higher than the 4-week average throughout the whole day part. I guess it was a week-long appointment listening thing. Maybe it was like the, you know, rising tide lifts all boats or whatever, however that phrase goes. If you'll direct your eyes to the upside down heart, the total sessions for this day part on this day was 5,016. So in other words, DTS is showing us what 5,016 cars did. They listened to Joy FM during afternoon drive on Thursday, July 16th. That same day part in Nielsen, when if we were to subscribe at that level to know all this, it will probably tell us that we had maybe 60 to 80 meters tuned in throughout the entire afternoon drive. Here's one more look at some real-time data. This is for Boost. You might notice that big dip on July 4th. It was a Saturday, Independence Day. Historically, July 4th has been a really big day for us. Signature keynote day. We have mixed shows all day. They're pre-produced and loaded into wide orbit ahead of the broadcast. The feedback on them has always been great. We've got past Nielsen data saying that we get spikes on July 4th, but what happened in DTS? Well, because these segments are all kind of titled the exact same way in DTS auto stage, at some point DTS just, I guess, gave up on checking in on us. So best we can tell, the RDS appeared frozen to them. So no love for Boost there. Going forward, we changed everything. Like that following Monday, we immediately changed how we label those kinds of things in wide orbit so that shouldn't happen again. I guess if you're doing a station where you might have longer blocks of programming, talk or spoken word, preaching, whatever, you might want to be mindful of that if you want DTS to hopefully accurately capture your listening. I don't know if you remember the Chicago numbers from a few minutes ago, but well, here, let's go take a look real quick. I mean, there's a talk station at the very top of the market, WBBM News Talk. So I'm guessing they have a strong RDS game. One last look at some real-time data. Zoomed in on day-by-day listening. This is something that you could see in Nielsen, but unlike our other comparisons, Nielsen and DTS agree on this. We're looking at Joy FM in St. Louis during April. What's your guess about what's happening over on the right? If your answer is anything other than fundraising week, you lose, and you just became our latest $1-a-day donor. Thank you so much. If you're in a market with multiple CCM stations and you've always had a hunch, but never been able to verify that maybe your audience goes to your competitors, well, hunch proved. This is the Raleigh-Durham Metro. It's got a K-Love signal and the light in that market. Most of the weeks I peeked in was when I was putting this together, K-Love had a slight edge over the light. But when they went into their spring fundraising event, the light took their place in the top 5. Most of what we've looked at is the premium version of DTS Auto Stage. Their free version can give you some glimpses into your audience, but not as deep as what we covered. My favorite feature is the heat maps. Here are 3 stations in St. Louis. We have our worship format that just signed on a few months ago on your far left, Joy FM in the middle, and Boost on the far right. Now, let's not forget DTS is only measuring what's happening in cars. And chances are your hotspots are going to coincide with where your listeners drive the most, where the traffic jams happen. Even so, you see some noteworthy distinctions. Worship One seems like it's doing decently in a corridor here where I think some of our city's largest college campuses are. Joy FM's bright spots are mostly all in the suburbs, which lines up with everything else we know about who listens to Christian contemporary music. And Boost excels in our market's urban core and gets love in some suburbs that the other two brands don't see the same saturation in. Time for a reality check. So DTS Auto Stage is towering over Nielsen with sample size. But I started wondering, okay, they told me there were, X number of tens of thousands of cars with DTS on the road in a week, but how many total cars are on the road? What share is that? So, and at least of the DTS cars, how many of them are listening to radio versus not listening to radio? I had to use AI for this, and had the thought of grabbing Edison Media's share of ear data and having AI kind of crunch the numbers. We landed at roughly 145,000 DTS cars were active last week. A little more than 32,000 of them had their radios on, which also means a whole lot more didn't. Quiet part out loud. Just keep that here in the family. It's safe to say that radio's pie among the other vehicles in the market, the non-DTS vehicles, probably a bigger slice of that pie just because not easy for them to get all digitally connected or whatever. Also, if someone's listening to your brands through your app or a third-party aggregator like iHeart, you're not getting the credit for that on this slice of the pie here. With that big caveat out of the way, we're still dealing with a huge bucket. DTS's sample size 30 times larger in our market last week than Nielsen's was. So we've thrown a lot of numbers around, some maps and stats, and I'm sorry if that's not your thing, but you're welcome if it is. We're almost done with the left brain stuff. I mentioned a few minutes ago that for all the metrics DTS does give you, you don't see your CUM, your actual audience size. But there's enough information that you could crunch numbers yourself. DTS gives you your CUM percentage. You can find your market's total pop count through the census website. You can use government information to find out how many registered vehicles are in your market. There are free access to studies like the Edison one, and Nielsen. We know what portion of radio listening takes place where versus car, office, home. The government even has data on number of passengers per vehicle. There's just a lot of ways that you could begin to estimate your CUM. So we, as in I and Gemini, came up with the raw count formula. And I won't do the math in front of you in real time. It's just as painful as when someone does fundraiser math on the air. But you find your DTS monthly car count, you divide that by 1.7, and I'll explain why 1.7 in just a moment. You divide your car count by DTS's total cars in the market. You got to do a little 4-week average calculation yourself until DTS provides that. Maybe they started providing that after I put this together. And then you multiply that by your total metro population. And that could be your in-car CUM estimate. But you have listeners in other places too, right? So last step was you take that number and multiply it by 1.43. 1.43 represents 70% of listening coming from vehicles and 30% from homes, offices, whatever. If you wanted to play around, maybe that historically your brand's more been like 60-40 or 80-20. You'd have a different number than 1.43. And if you want to contact me after this, I can talk you through that. Back to the very top of that calculation, the 1.7, that's how you account for your audience turnover. The higher the number you plug into that spot, the more churn you're having. I settled on 1.7 because Nielsen has said that for our brands, we're very TSL driven more than we are people bouncing in and out. If you have direct competition or you just know that your TSL could use some work, you might adjust that 1.7 to a different number, higher or lower. This is just one way you could go about estimating your CUM. And I wonder and hope that DTS eventually cooks up their own method and they bake it into the experience. I mean, that'd be my master plan if I was in their shoes. Or maybe they'll license this out to third parties the way Nielsen does to figure these things. Hopefully for rates much more within reach than the Nielsen software. So we plugged our vehicle count into the CUM equation. And here's what each of our brands got. Boost on your far left, 160,000 in DTS compared to 101,000 in Nielsen. That's a 58% difference. Joy FM in the middle, 30% difference, significantly more CUM going by this approach. And our Worship brand, our newest station, getting the most love of all in DTS compared to Nielsen. Because I'm fair and balanced, though, even more so than your favorite news outlet or least favorite, Got a few final cautions about DTS, kind of restate some of it. It's concentrated heavily in the 2020 plus connected vehicles, inherently underrepresents drivers of older vehicles and lower income demographics. Um, the the immediacy of the information, because you can go back and look at, yesterday, today, is you might be tempted to knee jerk at some of what you see, and it's still important to have averages. Just like you'd have a full quarter's worth of Nielsen numbers at minimum to even start evaluating certain trends or elements, you'd need a DTS baseline to hang your hat on too. And I don't know if it's 4 weeks or something else. Lastly, some sections in DTS, DTS to weekly data, other sections, DTS to monthly. So that can be a bit confusing when you're trying to nail down, an accurate cume. That said, a lot of practical uses for DTS, from where you're placing your stop sets to if you're a commercial station or really aggressive with the underwriting, how long your stop sets are, the effectiveness of any pre-promotion and appointment listening you're doing, if you have benchmarks that drive listening, above average, or I guess conversely chase listening away. And then, of course, using the map to target a variety of efforts from community and public appearances to sales strategies, which is actually the next slide here, some takeaways for those that are selling spots. You could show your business partners some tangible, timely proof of your reach. Use that heat map to create campaigns in the areas that you're positioned to have the most impact. And you could wave the "we have affluent listeners" flag if you do well in DTS, and maybe have some proof that your keynote features and benchmarks are worth a premium rate. If you're currently with RRC and or Nielsen, feeling like you should cancel ASAP because you loved a lot of this DTS stuff, now remember, there are still some things that Nielsen does well. Plenty of existing ad buyers on the commercial side, they know and understand Nielsen and don't have much knowledge about DTS yet, is my guess. Nielsen has this thing called MRC accreditation, which means that there's just a lot of types of advertisers that put stock in Nielsen numbers. And DTS, as far as I know, doesn't have that, and I don't know if they're trying to get it. If you stick around with Nielsen long enough to have quarterly and yearly averages, you're going to have demographic and listening location information that's probably close-ish to reality. And they try, keyword try, recruiting balanced samples. Though you could argue that when they don't get what they're trying to recruit for, their weighting makes numbers look odd. Also, just, my perspective on customer service is Nielsen reps and Dave at RRC have always been pretty prompt in their responses to me. I might not always love their answers to my questions, but I don't usually get left hanging. DTS has been a bit of a different story for me up to this point. I hope they're able to figure that part out, especially given the education and service they would need to provide if they want this to really catch on and be a long-term win for them and for us on the radio side. I also hope that they're aware that one of our biggest complaints against Nielsen is that price, even if it's the RC discount, that they can price access this information competitively. I have reached out for quotes numerous times, and I'm still waiting. Like I said at the top of this, I'm not selling you on DTS. These opinions are mine. Didn't even run them through CMB first, so hope we're all in good standing. The potential of the platform, if they can get this stuff figured out and execute it really nicely, really enormous. The biggest headline one last time is the sample size. That by itself does not make their data more accurate than Nielsen's, at least not today, but we're giving it a few years, and we'll see. Also, the immediacy, the way that DTS AutoStage can paint a compelling real-time picture of the impact that we're having in our communities. You have actionable insights on your programming very quickly. In your development, funding, sales team has a constant stream of information they can use to champion your brand. So that's all I have for you. I want to thank you for allowing me to share what I've observed with DTS for the past few months. Anything that you liked or found useful, I'll take credit. Anything you didn't like is AI's fault. Just kidding. All glory to God. And if we have time for questions, down for that too.
I love it, Mike. Thank you. And giving us a sneak peek of your special Dry Bar comedy series coming out. We appreciate that as well.
Yeah.
We did get a couple of questions. We're going to try to get through as many as we can. I do want to encourage folks, we're not done. So if you want to drop a question in, we should have time for several today. So feel free to drop those in the chat. All right. So first up, the first one from Rick. I'm seeing that metadata is a big factor in the DTS data. So if stations aren't sending their data to DTS, like those of us who subscribe, is that actually hurting the accuracy of the market ranking data?
I can't say for certain, but I would guess. Although that being a caveat, I want to go back to which market was it? Um, oh, look at that guy. Sorry. Here in Lansing, um, we're not sending, as far as I know, our metadata data game there is nil. So we have a little bit of RDS game there, but nothing in the way of metadata. But that signal clearly is, not being, I'm guessing not being hampered by our lack of
Yeah.
for that.
Okay.
But it's the best practice for sure to get that straightened out.
Okay. All right. Good deal. All right. Our next question. So these are showing us those 2020 plus cars, so the newer cars. Knowing this, and you touched on this a little bit, so I wonder if maybe it's just maybe expounding on it a little bit more. So do you think we can safely assume that the cars that don't have DTS are probably listening the same way? You were kind of talking about that conversion rate, maybe some projections we could make with that.
I don't know. I feel we're at the point that most people that they want to, they want to hear their playlists on Spotify or whatever, and they don't have a DTS car. They've gone to the trouble of buying the adapter to make it happen. So it would just be conjecturing, but my
Yeah.
guess would be there's probably some similarity. But if you have one of these cars, you definitely, or even had ones rental, you've experienced the smoothness of plugging your phone in. Sometimes almost to a fault where I've had rentals that they default to phone first, and you've got to go 3 menus deep to find the radio. So
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. What about so Mike, obviously you've spent a lot of time with this data, and as someone who's been in programming, what are your top two or three direct changes that you've made because of this new intake of data that's available?
we haven't made any changes. We've just been observing. So um, other than I mentioned the RDS change for those pre-produced mix shows on Boost, we made that change, just a few days after July 4th. But as far as like major programming, hey, we're gonna do stop sets here or nothing like that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Next question. Did I hear you say that in-car listening via the app is not counted?
Not through DTS, no. Um, I would hope. I feel like there's enough of go back to that pie. Sorry. Um, yeah, no, they're not measuring that. I would hope, seeing as how I feel like there's got to be a way. What do I know? Because I don't know how to code or anything. But your car's plugged into the radio that's also sending the FM and AM signal information to DTS. I feel like there'd be a way to make that work at some point.
Yeah, that makes sense. Someone's asking the question, okay, so we've been talking a lot about it from like the programming perspective. So if someone's going through the process of setting this up, like how does this loop in the digital side of things, like the digital team at a station, Because we also hear a lot, maybe some of the other webinars and conversations we've had about, it's also presentation. How are we making sure this is presenting itself well on the digital dashboard? Did any of that factor into DTS data and how we're calculating things?
I'm not sure how it factors into like how things are calculated. I was thinking that one of the things that DTS can show you if you're logged in, I'm not sure if it's premium or free access or if it's just premium, but I think it is showing you how things are looking on your listeners' radios. So, for instance, we found that they had, before we had our own login, they had defaulted to a logo that we haven't used on Joy FM in, I don't know, almost 10 years.
Yeah.
So I was able to log in, upload that logo, and within 10 minutes, it was on, correctly displayed on the cars in the market. You can also see how artists are, displayed, um, how
Yeah.
how everything's displayed artist wise on the car radio for your listeners. Um, I don't know. I don't think the DTS lets you adjust if like, you're playing, I don't know, Notorious B.I.G. and Stephen Curtis Chapman showing up. Why would it be like that? You can't fix that in DTS, but there are, we use Rapid, there are other ways you could fix that. DTS would at least show you, hey, that doesn't look right, and then you can do something from there to fix it.
Okay, awesome. Do you know if HD radio metadata is required on your station for DTS or does RDS suffice?
You don't need HD metadata. Uh, really, you don't even need RDS. I saw when I was skimming through markets, plenty of stations that, yeah, aren't RDSing and they're still showing up, decently, consistently. So everything you can do probably helps you, I'm guessing, since DTS is literally measuring um, PI or pi. I'm not sure exactly how they say it, those codes or signals.
What about this is a fun question, and you kind of touched on this a little bit about maybe some differences of the data, but the question was raised, would you consider DTS and Nielsen direct competitors? How,
Yes.
why?
Yes. I really hope that ends up being the case. Going back to the sample size alone, we've all, seen, maybe even felt it one way or the other. You get a homeschool family that all has meters and listening to your station, and you get a nice bump as long as they're in the panel. And then when they leave the panel or go on vacation, boom, there are just so many vehicles constantly being monitored by DTS that, when that homeschool family goes on vacation or leaves, there's no such thing as them leaving the panel, right? So the stability alone, and if they could answer some of the demographic questions, although I'm not sure that they need to, because there are enough other ways you can research your audience now where if you want to know something demographically, there are other ways you could approach that. If I mean, DTS is really, a great tool for measuring your reach and impact.
Yeah.
And we all know, CCM, we know who the audience is. So, and you might, skew one way or the other, but we know where the core audience is, and if you're serving them well, they're going to make up a bulk of what you see in DTS.
Yeah, yeah, it's good. We'll probably wrap up with this question. I think it's a good one, just because obviously, as we're talking about new technology, we're trying to learn more. We've had someone pose the question that, do you have a good contact, someone that you guys have found has worked well, understands our format, anyone you'd recommend that people can reach out to for more information?
There was a gentleman named Juan who was at Momentum. If someone wants to shoot me an email, if I got my contact information here, yeah, I will. He's the only one I know. There might be others, but he's the only one I know on that end of things.
Excellent, excellent. And with now knowing all of this data, Mike, I think Kevin gives us a great strategy for everybody. If we can all just have the staff drive around listening through DTS for 3 hours every day, that would really help really drive those numbers up. So,
Absolutely.
hey, Mike, we can't say thank you enough. Thank you for taking time to walk us through this. Really exciting stuff to see. Again, something that was dreamed about for years, now actually starting to be implemented, and we're learning new things from it. Thank you for taking the time to put all this together and help walk us through.
You bet.
Awesome. Hey, and we want to thank you as well. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar. It's always a privilege to get to spend time with you. We know you have a lot going on in your day. Thank you for making this investment not only in yourself, but in your team. And just as a quick couple of reminders, today's the last day to register for the Gold Member Gathering. If you haven't had a chance to do that, you still can. You can find info at cmbonline.org. And the 2026 CMB Tech Survey is live. Registration's open. I'll send you info if you text the keyword tech to 72747. And mark your calendar. Our next webinar is coming up Wednesday, October 14th. We'll look forward to seeing you then too. Have a great day.